a lot of the buzz around AI has been focused on how can we most cheaply produce the highest volume of content. It's an arms race between tools generating proliferation of garbage content, right, in the whole internet ecosystem. My early 20s that I was like, I think I'm really into this storytelling thing. And it was when I decided I really wanted to go back to Mongolia. And I lived there and taught English through a Fulbright scholarship for a year and started a blog. And it was there where I first realized, like, I just have to share my experiences with my friends and family back home. And I used that Canon PowerShot finally and put it to use. And I realized, what's even cooler than photos? Videos, because that really shows, kind of more of the story and setting and context. And I really got involved in, sharing a lot of my travels in Mongolia, adventures with herders and nomads, and excursions in the city of the capital in Ulaanbaatar, and really enjoyed it. Ended up freelancing a fair amount for some magazines, my alumni magazine, my hometown paper. I was writing and taking photos. And after that year was over, I was like, man, I just got to learn video. I really want to learn, more tools to tell stories visually. And I ended up, long story short, going to UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism for multimedia. So I really got a chance to take classes in photojournalism, video journalism, documentary film, and new media, which is, a lot of design and, basic website coding and principles of interactive media storytelling and narratives. And I had a blast. I ended up, after that, moving back to Mongolia as a freelancer for several years. I got another Fulbright fellowship in creative arts in filmmaking to produce a longer documentary that was really kind of an extension of my love for Mongolia, to be honest. And I ended up
Yeah.
freelancing for the New York Times and CNN and Bloomberg and a bunch of, major Western outlets while I was based there, and doing a mixture of photo, video, text stories, kind of whatever people would take. And I really fell in love with the craft and felt really at home in that. And, I've done a lot of similar video and photo stories, as well as travel writing for Atlas Obscura and other outlets back in the States since moving back too. So I still do some of that. That's still part of my real core of storytelling.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I did, of course, notice that a lot of the videos and other stories that you have on your website are around Mongolia and various things that are happening there. Um, I'm not even sure uh, how to ask the question, but I guess I'm wondering, like, what, after spending so much time there, what do you think you most took away from that time with you? What did you take? What did you learn? What did you take back here?
Yeah. Well, a wife, first of all, most importantly, which was not the plan originally, but when you put it that way, I really never left Mongolia, and it's still part of my everyday life, right? And I go back every year. I lead trips there. I will try to do some reporting there as well when I'm back. The summers there are just magnificent. And, there's about 8 to 10 weeks of stellar weather, and Mongolia's got everything, really. If you're into outdoor stuff like I am, really into, as you saw with that, high elevation, winter, mountain biking story, getting off the grid. And Mongolia is one of the last true frontiers in that sense. And I was inspired the first time I stepped foot there to go back, because it's really rare that there's still indigenous, sort of nomadic pastoralists living in very similar way to a millennia or two ago, right, in the same space. And so that cultural legacy is alive, and there's so many things that make it unique and are really, really fascinating, to tell and share those stories and dig in deeper with new layers. I speak Mongolian at a pretty basic level. It was better when I lived there, pretty intermediate, but now it's gotten a lot more rusty. But being able to, have those conversations and scratch the surface even a little bit with the deep sort of language and cultural barrier really, made me only want to get more off the grid and spend more time, especially with, the families who are living really on the edge of the world in many ways, right? Who are, to them, they're just part of the landscape and the natural systems and flows and seasonal rhythms, and that just fascinates me, their connection to nature and dependence and reliance on it and interdependence with it. It's so fascinating, and I think there's a lot to learn from it, and I'm still drawn to that. And um, I really have allowed it to change me in many ways. But even moving on to a different phase of my career now, I always really cherish those memories, and I'm still, a lot of my best friends, half of my family now is in Mongolia, so it's, daily part of my life still, which is cool.
You, I know we have a lot of stuff to touch on and talk about, and it's not necessarily a travel podcast, but you made me think about something when you talked about speaking, some basic Mongolian. And I just came back from Europe. My wife had a different Europe trip than me, and obviously there's you can go places there where people speak English just fine, or at least well enough. But we have often talked about living abroad, and language always comes up, right? Because there certainly are lots of places you can go where you're not going to find a whole ton of English speakers. And for you, I'm assuming you didn't, super deep dive Mongolian before you went to go teach English there. What was it
No.
like to all of a sudden be in a country where I'm going to assume not a whole lot of people speak English?
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't really have the opportunity or find it. I probably could have taken classes on Skype, right? This is even before Zoom was big, and found some ways to do it, but I was just too busy with other stuff. And when I got there, I realized, I really need to understand what the heck is going on and be able to appreciate things and build relationships, most importantly with my colleagues, my students. And a little bit goes a long way, obviously. A lot goes even further. And so being able to just take a few lessons. The first year I didn't really invest in it much as a English teacher. I was in the capital city where a lot of people, my co-teachers, they spoke English, more predominantly than you'd expect in sort of professional circles. In every organization, there's, a couple people who speak English pretty well, at least, right? If not some who've, graduated from US universities and are totally fluent, right? And
Right.
the reality is once you leave the city, there's basically, the capital, which is a mega city, over 1 million people there, and suddenly no one speaks it. And so the places where I wanted to spend the most time, where really the richness of Mongolia's landscapes and culture lives, there's no English. There's, and relying on a guide and a translator really sucks. It really, you know, you can only get so far. I mean, it's great if it's fine if you're a tourist, right? But if you're really trying to understand what's going on and do kind of reporting and longer term, projects and all that, like you need to, and it's almost disrespectful to not invest in that if you're really serious about living somewhere outside your native country with a different language. Like that's my personal opinion, obviously, but
Yeah.
that's how I
No,
felt
I,
at least
I
when I was
totally agree
there.
with you. Yeah. 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 I agree with that. I think if you're going to live somewhere else, you should probably try to, speak the language.
Yeah, make the effort.
Yeah.
Goes a long way.
Yeah.
Peter, I'm
So,
curious. Go ahead, Bill.
nope.
I'm curious. So we've got, your really cool past experiences. And then I'd love to know what you're doing today and kind of bridge that gap. Like, how did you get from doing all that amazing work to now what you do today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's been a process. I basically at Cal's journalism school studied drone videography, AR and VR and 360 video production, and was always really, really curious about the latest tech tools for storytelling, right? And I immediately after graduating started teaching short workshops and then longer, mini courses and eventually regular lecture there as, kind of a visiting lecture in a number of different classes from drone videography to the future of visual storytelling, which I ended up teaching on and off for the last 5 years and is where I got introduced to AI originally. I was handed a syllabus from my mentor and actually a professor who is really one of my closest advisors during my master's program. He sent me a PDF and I saw like an entire unit on AI, and we had barely touched on it in my actual courses because this was 6 years ago or so. It was very nascent, nowhere near where the tech is today. um, and the first year I taught that class, I think maybe I didn't even teach that unit because it was so unimpressive to me. And it wasn't at a place where I felt like students could use it for any part of their storytelling process, right? And obviously, times have changed, right? I continued to teach that course. Even while I was in Mongolia, I would fly back and teach at Cal for a month and then, visit family, then go back to Mongolia for more projects. Like continued to be in the US, and I had some really good experiences at Cal in those early days, just thinking through like, okay, what are the tools that are really part of the narrative arsenal for pros, and was able to in that class have a ton of amazing guest speakers come in too and use that to network. And AI kept on coming up in the background, right, with all of these leading experts. And so I eventually started playing around with the tools more, having more and more of the course content in my class be AI. And this past year, obviously, was nearly half AI, and probably could have been 100% AI storytelling tools, right, in my class about visual storytelling and future of media. But I've slowly, after moving back to the US due to the pandemic largely, you know built more and more momentum around exploring and teaching these AI tools and using them, right, as well. Obviously, experimenting constantly. I'm addicted to new tech tools. I've always been that way, and it's part of the rush I get and the enjoyment of this sort of revolution we're in the middle of when it comes to generative AI. So I'm having a blast with it. I teach remotely classes online. I do consulting with communications firms and companies for how to do everything from generative AI guidelines internally to best practices, employee trainings, uh, actually building internal products too to help with content and editorial workflows using AI. And my previous business of kind of photo and video stuff is still there, but it's really slowly, especially this past year, moving to the rearview mirror as more of these other projects are coming up and into the fore. And I've started this company as part of that process called the Upgrade, which is really kind of a housing for all these different ways in which I'm helping people bridge the gap in storytelling and AI. And there's just so many professionals who have no idea where to even start with these tools, or they open it up and they don't really know where to begin. And it's an opportunity and it's fun for me because this is my passion, to find out ways in which, I can align myself to, be a partner for them, whether it's consulting or, having them come to one of my online classes or just subscribe to my free newsletter, right? And soon to be podcast, right? And listen in and hopefully gain something from that.
I'm wondering a couple of things about it. One, what tool or new emerging part of AI or machine learning are you super excited about right now? And there's a lot of talk, and I think it's good talk about how to use AI, machine learning, all these tools responsibly, how to use them in a way that does not negate or dampen human creativity and experience. So I'd love to sort of hear your take on that as well.
Yeah. I mean, could spend hours talking about this. I literally teach about this. So I need to figure out how to package this discreetly. The first things that come to mind are, the personalization of content, right? And being able to reach your audience in a way that is really speaking to them, in a way that was never possible before. I think there's a lot of ways, in which a lot of the buzz around AI has been focused on, as Miles said in our podcast interview, like this automation of content and really
Mm,
race to the bottom in terms of how can we most cheaply produce the highest volume of content, right? And that is
right.
something that is a bit of a fallacy, and it's an arms race between, these tools generating proliferation of garbage content, right, in the whole internet ecosystem, and the algorithms like Google search to try to cut through all of that and serve you content that's relevant. And search itself is changing dramatically, right? It's not going to be the same ever again. Already
Right.
ChatGPT with Bing, which was at the probably very bottom of everyone's list when it comes to search tools even a year ago, is now integral to the way that I browse the internet. And it serves me results that are highly personalized. And this is going to result in a big transformation in terms of internet traffic to publishers, to websites, and the way that SEO works is changing fundamentally. So, it's a good thing for consumers. It's a challenge for creators and publishers. I think there's definitely going to be pros and cons, right? And it depends on who you're talking about too. It's really complex, and the ethics of it are a huge part of my work too with clients, as well as the discussions in my classes. There's not real consensus in terms of any specific use cases, even in a single industry, right? And so it's really very fresh, very new. There's ongoing litigation and policies being formed around it. And I would say, the ethical framing for those is still being formed, and it's really the Wild West when it comes to this technological landscape. And there's so many questions, more than answers at this stage, right?
Yeah. How do you, like, personally, obviously you use these tools, you teach about these tools. There seems to be some new development in these tools every day, right?
Right.
Um, is there a way that you can language your uh, mm, where you stand with them and your creativity and how you like to talk about that and share that? I mean, obviously everybody has to come up with their own, place with it given their values and ethics and where they're at. But how is it for you? How do you feel like you can best use these tools and still have your voice and your creativity shine through?
Yeah, I think that's really the absolute best question that every creative and creator and really person on the internet these days, right, is asking or should be asking themselves. That's really
Mm-hmm.
one of the best questions I've heard in a long time about this. And I think that for me, I try to, first of all, stay up to date with what's possible, because that changes daily, right? And currently I'm using, a mixture of tools for text generation, for search and research assistant, for scheduling, for organizing and tagging data, for my editorial workflows are automated to a degree in terms of generating social copy and helping to draft outlines for some of my classes too, teaching, right? It can be really, really helpful. I see it as really an assistant in every aspect. I never want to automate the entire process. And I don't know if you guys saw the headlines this week of Sports Illustrated being caught kind of with their pants down, with an entire fleet basically of AI generated fake authors pumping out AI generated content. Like, that's the worst case scenario, right? Like, that is so dystopian, and it's such a gaffe and forced error, really unforced error, I should say. It doesn't make sense to me why you would want to do that, because so many reasons, right? First of all, brand integrity. And it's one thing, this is funny, like amongst journalists even that I've talked to, they're like, why doesn't someone just disclose that they're going to do this and create an AI content farm for their publication, like branded as something else, like a research lab, whatever, and then just go for it, and everyone knows, and see how it goes and see how people like it and test it kind of in the
Right.
open. Like, all of these publications that have done this, they're not the first, right? There's been several others within the last year who've gotten caught with AI generated content. Famously, CNET was probably the first that I knew of, which is a tech pub, and they looked really stupid when they did that. And it's mind-blowing to me, like, when you go to that extent to automate your content creation and not disclose it all, like that's worst case scenario, right? Best case scenario
Yeah.
is telling probably every single detail of how you're using AI and every step of your production process, but no one cares, like, honestly. Like, and that amount of disclosure is sometimes just superfluous and ridiculous to expect of people creating content too. And like, there's a middle ground somewhere that I'm searching for personally. Like, it's tough, and I've actually struggled with this, to be honest. Like, I'm trying to work to make my own set of editorial guidelines for my newsletter, right, which is fairly recent.
Right.
It's been around for the last few months, and I've been slow to put that together because I've really been thinking every single installment for that, and with my podcast and other things, about how do I really envision myself using this, and remaining really open with my audience about my use of it in a way that's not distracting or superfluous or oversharing or undersharing, right? Obviously, I write my own posts. I use research tools to be able to draft and outline them, and I try to use them for a lot of other things related to my publishing process too. But it's still me doing
Right.
90% of the
And you're
work,
and
right?
you're
So
not putting
at least,
something out there unless you feel good about it, I would assume.
of course. And like, that's the key
Yeah.
that I recommend and emphasize with all my clients and students, is really making sure that you are doing the work, you're doing the research and the fact checking if you're getting results from these algorithms. And if you're using it to outline or even write parts of your articles, if you're struggling with word choice or whatever, you want something to start with besides a blank page, which can be intimidating. It can really suck, right? And so it's great to have something to help you with that writer's block. I always, if I do that, end up rewording almost the entire thing, right? Personally, just to make sure it fits my style. Eventually, right, it'll get to the level where I have sort of a corpus of work and database of content to feed and train, though, my own AI assistant that will really represent my own voice. And that's where I think it becomes a slippery slope, where the assistants, even just look at custom GPTs where you can upload lots of data multiple pages of inputs and links and custom instructions and almost replicate your entire process eventually, right? And that's very scary. I think that deserves a different level of disclosure, but again, there's no real like consensus about this. And these are exactly the types of conversations I like to have on my podcast too, and with my students and peers, because everybody feels differently about it. And it's different for every medium too, right? For image generation, for example, I use Midjourney for a lot of my header photos that go with my articles or on my, main page for my newsletter. And, a lot of those are basically taking the place of kind of stock imagery or editorial sort of photography or something, right? As an individual creator, it's great to be able to, quickly have a passable image that matches my article without paying for a license, for Shutterstock or whatever, right? And to be able to really customize it and tailor it to my content. And I've wondered in the past, like, should I be disclosing that this is AI generated? Because to me, like, it's really obvious that almost all of them are, right?
Right.
I have one
But that's to you.
about
You
so
know,
that's
yeah.
that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going is like, and then I realized the other day, I think it was probably talking with Miles on the pod, where I have a photo of Joe Biden face to face with like a Terminator robot, which is part of the article about the White House's new AI policies, right? And kind of facing off with the threat of AGI. And so, like, that was the image that I used to illustrate and prompt Midjourney, and it turned out to be a great image. It's photorealistic, right? And so that's kind of the scary thing is like, I don't personally think anyone's dumb enough to think that's real, right? But at the same time, I also want to make sure 100% that they don't accidentally. And,
Right.
I lose some credibility in that process. But there's not a way to disclose that currently in my landing page, at least. Like within my newsletter, right? I can put in the caption, this is AI generated, right? And I want to do that. But most of my images for stock are just used for that landing page. I can't really find a
Right.
way. The product isn't built to do that. And the images, right? There's no system for kind of watermarking or anything in the metadata really that's currently widespread and available to do that easily, at least. So I need to, grapple with that and think about, do I need to stop using these or think differently about it? Or how do I, this is why I think it's really important for me as a newsletter writer, even though, it's a personal project, right? To make sure that people really understand what my values are around this, where I think it's important to disclose and when I will do that. And I'm still figuring it out, Bill. I really wish I had 100% on lockdown all this, but it's different for every single creator, every project, every medium. If you're a company, right, it's almost easier to have guidelines and policies than if you're an individual creative, right, or creative, I think, where you have to kind of struggle with this solo, right?
Well, Peter, I love what you said, and I love that you clearly have a big heart and are a very optimistic guy. I promise you, people are dumb enough to think that that's real. And you bring up a great point. Is maybe there should be a way to watermark or caption or something, anything, any image that's AI generated. I mean, when I use
Right.
I use Unsplash for images all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always make sure that that caption's in there. That somebody knows that somebody took that picture. It's not mine. I didn't take it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. And it likes to try to make you do that. I mean, obviously, I can get rid
Mm-hmm.
of it if I really want to. I don't know why I would, but
Right.
that seems like it'd be an awful simple fix for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of AI image related ills. You
Right.
know,
And I would be fine with that if Midjourney gave me the option to put in a little bug in the right hand corner of the image or wherever I wanted it,
Yeah.
a little watermark. Like, MJ, whatever. Like,
Right.
I would appreciate that, honestly, as a consumer,
Yeah.
to have the option, right? In some cases, you probably wouldn't want to do that, right? But for me, like, it's a very different use case. Like, I'm not a brand. Like, it's complicated because currently, legally, right, it's really up in the air whether we'll be able to ever copyright something, either as an individual
Mhm.
or an LLC or whatever, that is generated by these Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, Dolly, image generating tools. And it honestly might be a good thing if we're not able to, right? In some ways, but yeah, in others, it's additionally challenging because that is going to create a number of other problems too. But it's probably, yeah, an evolving landscape here we need to really keep track of and think about critically.
The world is overwhelming. We're constantly being pulled in a million directions, and it's only going to get worse. So much of what we're sold online is about planning, strategizing, and thinking. But doing is the hardest and most important part. The box is where projects get finished. In the box, you'll organize, prioritize your projects, and finish what you start. You won't learn anything new. You'll simply get a lot done and be a part of a small community of doers. Go to theboxworkshop.com.
Critically.
Yeah, because it's like the floodgates are open now, and it's just a spectrum. Like if we're starting here, you can imagine in not that much time where it could be and how people could use it for good and for bad. And we kind of talked about that. We had a conversation yesterday, and I found myself in knots at times. My brain was just getting twisted at how like big these questions are and how little I can understand and grasp it. And I think that the question of like when can you take ownership of it, and when does that stop? When does the ownership end? And the example of like Grimes, right? The artist who got on who kind of like led from the front and said, this isn't going to slow down. Go ahead, and whoever wants to make music using AI with my music, just let me know. And if it gets to I think you said if it gets like to the charts or whatever, then we'll find a contract that we can kind of split it. So it's kind of like everyone wins in that way. And I think it's how can we find a way ethically where humans can still do their thing, because that would suck if we just build a tool that completely replaces everything, but
Right.
also making it ethical so that the right parties get the right credit. It's a big topic. I'm curious what you think. Like, okay, to someone who's listening who's like not huge on AI and not super up to date, and kind of has that negative doomsday perspective, which is easy to fall into.
Could also be easy if you are up to date, to be fair.
Yeah, great point.
Maybe easier.
Great.
Yeah, I mean,
Great point. Well,
I would
what would you say to
it's
them,
not
though?
divided. I would say, one of the most important things in the next couple of years that we're going to see is litigation more than policy when it comes to copyright issues, right? Across all these different mediums. And to your point, and I think we talked about this on my pod too, like YouTube has an interesting, pretty progressive policy, right? With music creators specifically partnering with labels to be able to pilot a project where you can have the ability to post AI generated content in the voice or style of your favorite artist. And if they approve of it, they can have some sort of rev split, right? Through, the YouTube platform. Really cool. That I would love to see across every medium. And I think it's super important to be able to put those systems in place. Some of that will have to be legal. There needs to be new laws clearly. But because there's just so much gray area right now, and most of the laws for copyright are, decades and many cases over 100 or nearly 100 years old. So it's really imperative to reconceptualize, how copyright works in the AI era, right? Because everyone can remix everyone's content suddenly. How do we discern ownership or fractional ownership, which is probably a better sort of framework to think about, right? Like, how can we collaborate? And consent is super important in that too, obviously, right? Like, how, as a creator, can you control your material? I really struggle, as much as I love OpenAI's ChatGPT, with, the fact that they've essentially vacuumed up the whole possibly accessible known internet and are essentially appropriating that content to train their data on. And it's screwing over publishers and artists and writers and creators. And like, that's not okay. Right. And I really ethically have a big problem with that. But at the same time, I love these tools and they are mind
Right.
blowing. Is it an excuse though? Like, do the ends justify the means, right? Again, getting kind of philosophical, like, it's hard to put a stopper back in the bottle, right? Once the genie's been let out, but that's not necessarily a justification for completely, leaving artists and writers out in the cold, right? And it's a really problematic situation.
Well, look, I mean, Peter, before the top came out of the bottle, writers and artists were already out in the cold. The way that the
That's true.
ecosystem, I know the music ecosystem better than the publishing ecosystem, but they're very similar, right? We were already
Right.
screwed. I mean, the music business, the
Yep.
record business that I grew up in is gone. It's one of the reasons that I don't spend as much time making and playing music as I used to, because I literally can't get paid for it. There is no way
Right.
to get paid a reasonable amount of money for this thing that I spent 40 years
Wow. Yeah.
becoming pretty good at, right? There's just no way to do it. And does this make it more challenging? Maybe. Honestly, I have a hard time even looking at it that way, because it's already so fractional, right? Who cares if the fraction gets smaller? It's already ridiculous. So yeah,
Yep.
I do think it really does come down to regulation, and maybe we'll get lucky, and this issue will be such a hotbed that stronger regulation may come into play. That maybe royalty rates, digital royalty rates, copyright law can be shifted towards the artist and the writer, so that there's room for all this machine learning and AI stuff. Miles is going to freak out if I ask you a question like this, because, I guess last year he got really into AI for a minute. Obviously, he still is, but he got on the phone with me and he's all, yeah, and this and that. And I was, and of course, Miles and I always do this. I like to take the other side. And I was like, yeah, it's all crap and I don't want anything to do with it. And, I did that whole thing. Now, I find it just as fascinating as everybody else. I think that I have a little block around how best to use it. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that. You said a few minutes ago, you mentioned a few different ways that you've managed to harness some of these tools and have kind of an assistant, right? In various ways in your publishing sort of ecosystem that you have. Would you mind digging a little deeper in that, and talking about, like, someone like Miles or myself? We're both publishing some kind of weekly content, right, around maybe an essay or a newsletter or something, and have all this other content, right? Either past stuff that we've done all of these podcast episodes. There's really quite a lot of it. And one of the challenges without an assistant is, okay, how do I take that content, repurpose it, maybe use it in social media in different ways, all of that, without giving away your whole class, which now I kind of feel like I need to take.
I hope you do.
How might I look at a tool, or what tools could I maybe tap into that might help me take that content and use it across some different areas, like whether it's social posts or other ways to use my content?
Right. That's a fantastic question. So, yeah, one of the probably best ways to maximize your content is to simply be able to put it in different mediums, right? And that's something that there's a lot of different ways to do already through tools that are third party, that are already built out kind of as standalones. There's some great ones on my podcast. I've had on the founder of a tool called Augie, which is an AI assisted video editor, and it has in place, forget which image library. I'm not sure if it's Getty or Shutterstock or both, but really legally obtained stock imagery that can pop in and populate. And you can either upload your podcast audio. It also has voice cloning to be able to fill in through 11 Labs, which is the leading player in that space, and also has the ability to take uploaded text right from an essay or blog post or what have you, and generate a video script and draft video, right? What we would call a rough cut. And you can easily switch in and out the images, even video clips, stock video now, your own video, your own stuff. And it immediately accelerates the speed at which you can generate video from either audio or text content. It's awesome. There's also tools. Another one, I actually just got off a call with them, is called Videofy. And they have a really interesting model where they take text and turn it into a vertical video. So for newsletters, one of their use cases that they were talking about is basically creating a trailer for your newsletter to advertise it on social, right? So, or your blog or whatever. And it'll do the same thing. It will basically take that. It also has voice cloning, and it'll help you create an AI avatar if you want of yourself to actually. And I think Augie and many of these other tools are allowing this now too. It'll allow you to basically create your own talking head version of yourself to introduce whatever other content it is that you want to promote. And these are just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's hundreds, right, of other companies that are doing work in this space. I, in particular, know these two founders because they're former journalists, right, and have done really cool stuff as tech founders, both with venture capital funding and really hitting the ground running. It's fun to see that. And, I think both of them are also thinking pretty critically about some of the ethical issues. And they actually have at Augie, for example, you can go to AugX Labs. They have a watermark that is basically automatically put on if you clone your own voice, right? And it won't allow you to clone other people's. So that's pretty cool, right? Makes sense. It's reasonable. And there are ways to get around it for sure if you upload other content. But it's at least, I think, building in a moral compass to their product in ways that many others are not. So yeah, you guys should listen to that podcast interview with Jeremy Toman, the founder and CEO. Used to be very high up in tech at Warner Media and many others, coming from entertainment and news, but really cool company. One of this generation of AI startups that is, enabling people to create content and reuse it and repurpose it in different formats that is just fun, honestly. And yeah, really helps you be a little bit more productive and serve your audiences in a way that you couldn't, right? That's more engaging. That's more fun for them too. It's a,
Yeah.
a win-win. There's really a no-brainer if it's your own content, if it's legally, yeah, you know, stock assets, etc. Like it seems to be a pretty clear win for me. But yeah, I try to
Yeah.
ask myself this every time I see a new product. Like, is this okay to use?
Right.
How
Yeah.
okay is it? Like, how do I feel about it? What are the, things I'm not seeing in it? Or, yeah, the process behind it. And it's tough, right? It's tough to cut through that noise. And that's what I'm really trying to do with the upgrade and the media that I'm, putting out, and teaching my students to think critically about this stuff too, right?
Well, that actually makes me wonder, and maybe this is a better question. Is there are so many products out there, and it can be. I know for me, like I could spend days just looking at all the different things and not necessarily know or have, because I haven't used them, have like a good sort of critical thinking list in front of me of, okay, these are the things I want to
Right.
make sure of, right?
Right.
Is that something that you address in your newsletter? Is that something that if somebody listening is in the same position that you might be able to help them with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to be doing reviews of products starting on my YouTube channel
Nice.
weekly. I believe on Tuesdays, it'll be a mixture of tutorials and reviews of different products.
Awesome.
And yeah, there'll be short primers going through various, different tools like this and multimedia ones specifically, and thinking through that. And, I try to ask critical questions of founders when they come on my show as well, and try to, push them a little bit on this. And I think it's really important to do that, right? And to be asking critical questions of the creators and founders, as well as, the users and companies that are backing them, right? Like it's, I think, really easy to move forward and continue to just develop products and momentum and revenue, and get lost without thinking through, right, who wins, who loses, like who gains in this. Because yeah, suddenly, and when anything's possible with content creation, there's a huge need for people to be thinking about these questions, and talking to their elected officials about this, right? That's my take, right? And I'm also of the view that it's really important to let this space exist and continue to evolve and develop, right, at the same time, because it is critical. It is the future already. It's clear when there's 100 million weekly users of ChatGPT that it's serving a need. It's going to create many new businesses and economic upsides, right? I mean, and it's really tough to balance that. I don't envy you trying to be a legislator looking at this and thinking about drafting regulations. It's really tough. But I think, where I try to lend my voice a bit is at least promote some of the questions that we as consumers should be asking, and help answer a few of them, hopefully, and talk with a lot of, key figures, both who are creating these platforms and technologies, as well as everyday users in the storytelling space, right? And thought leaders and industry leaders among different sides of the media, whether that's, journalists, marketers, brand storytellers and strategists like you, Miles, and, creators and creatives of all types. It's, critical to have a forum and a platform for this. And I don't see anyone else doing it, which is why I decided to start content focused on that. And in addition to chronicling the news and headline roundups, it's really focused on those kind of deep existential questions as creators and creatives.
What's so cool to me, man, and I'm excited for what you're doing because I feel like so many people don't including myself, don't know how this can be used for good. Like it's easy to see the downsides like selfishly, it's easy to see, um, you know, maybe this is going to take my job. Am I even worth anything anymore? Like it's easy to go down that route, but I like thinking of it as like it it's happening no matter what, just like everything else that's happened up to this point in our history that has um, evolved and changed drastically. And you think like AI is just kind of an extension of us. Like we built it, we being humans, and like it can help us see our blind spots. It can help us with medical things. It can help us see biases or like how we're flawed, how we're being, maybe we're not seeing the other side in an argument, politically or with a person, relationship, or in a business, like seeing the other side. How is this going to impact the planet? You're right. Like strategically, you can kind of see the gaps and the mistakes and avoid those moving forward. That's how I kind of think it is, like filling our intelligence gaps that we have and trying to block out all the biases and stuff. So that's really exciting for me. Obviously we could talk about AI forever. I have so many so
Yeah.
many questions.
I have a comment just on what you said. It's
Please, yeah.
that all of that is absolutely true. But one thing to remember too is that all of these models have been trained on the internet, which is incredibly biased, right, in and of itself, and a reflection of, societies, right, like ours here in the US, that is very skewed in terms of its views, especially online. A lot of the data sets that we still don't know where they're from,
Yeah.
right, are from
Right.
really unsavory and, racist, yeah,
So that's
transphobic,
a
homophobic, misogynist, yeah, anti-Semitic, yeah, and other terrible factions of the internet, right? And those are
for
baked
sure.
into a lot of the algorithms and results that are output, and they are being trained to really avoid all that, but still, it's impossible to 100% remove that like
Well,
dark shadow underneath it, right?
I mean, machine learning, which is what we're talking about, right? We had another guest
Mm-hmm.
that I think maybe end up being a guest of yours that was very, very specific and wanted to make sure we stopped saying AI
Mm-hmm.
in our conversation because that's not. He said that's not what it is. It's machine learning, and the machine is only going to give results based on the information that it
The
has,
data.
right?
Yeah.
Just like a human being, right? If you bring a child up in a heavily, let's say, racist, misogynistic environment, well, what kind of human being do you think you're going to get? Now,
Yeah.
can that human being learn past that? Absolutely. Can the machine learn past that? Absolutely. It just has to be fed appropriate data. So it's really, I think Miles, my take on what you said is that it's an interesting mirror for human beings. In
Mm-hmm.
if you don't like the data, the information that machine learning is spitting out, well, maybe it's best to look at what are you feeding it, right? Because it's the same thing with human beings. If you don't
Right.
like, where human beings are at in a particular way, well, why don't you look at the information that they're consuming? Because it's the same problem.
Yeah. You and I could, Peter, you and I, because we're actually kind of working on some stuff and you're going to kind of help me with an idea, but you and I could build a tool based off what you just said, which is a problem. That's a problem that we've observed moving forward, is that a lot of this is built on data sets that we don't know or don't control, that have biases and all these problems. We could
Mm-hmm.
go build a tool that solves that. We could give it data and create data and teach it to teach itself to not have those biases and create that tool that can solve a problem for a certain number of people. I think, which is really exciting, because not only is that like a new way to solve problems for most people, it's also creating a lot of new ideas and opportunity for people to, which is happening right now. I mean, I'm assuming that's what's happening as we speak.
Yeah, I think so. That's true to a degree for sure. I think that, OpenAI and all of these other AI or machine learning companies, right, are working really hard to tweak their algorithms to be able to remove those effects or kind of nullify them as much as possible, right? Um, but yeah, it is exciting to be able to have access to your own sort of personal library of content and data and a model, right? That's likely open source, right? Like OpenAI or others that you can use underlying it to be able to really enhance and streamline and really draw from the data sets that you provide. And that's really cool, right? That's where things are going. And I'll be offering a class early in 2024 that's focused on how to essentially create your own custom AI content creation assistant for creators or editorial teams, right? That's focused on that specific aspect. So I think that's definitely a key insight. And you could, have custom AI assistants to do every sort of task that you could conceivably imagine as part of your work, whatever type of job it is, if it's online, if it's content related. So it's exciting to be able to think about that and customize and train them on your own data sets is so powerful, and integrate it into your own workflows and making sure that you have a hand in it. You're still reviewing and editing and crafting, but suddenly these tools, are going to be so much more powerful and useful than they are now, even, which is pretty useful already.
Yeah. Well, I think, Peter, you just answered a question that we usually ask, which is what's next for you.
Yeah,
I think you just answered that. So I have a different one.
sure.
The other thing that I was really struck with this morning when I was doing a quick dive in all things Peter Bittner is uh, you are a beautiful photographer. You take absolutely glorious pictures. It's art.
Thanks.
And I just want to know for sure that you're going to keep doing that and that you're going to keep
Definitely.
finding ways to put that out in the world.
Yeah, it's funny, like I think back to in my early days of journalism school when we're still being taught kind of analog crafts, like using a film camera, right? And thinking about things like physical frame rates, right? And a lot of legacy sort of vocabulary and terminology and workflows that really don't need to exist in this digital world, but people are still using real film, right? They're still shooting on those. And I think that it's going to be really important to preserve the techniques of, using what seems modern right now, but maybe sort of an, yeah, technological anachronism, right? Of using a real camera. And that's scary. I think it's going to be important to capture the truth and to capture maybe copyrightable imagery and video and visuals, right? And audio. I mean, I don't think it's going away, but it will occupy a different part of our sort of creative collective consciousness, right? It's going to change. Our concepts of cameras already, for me, are changing. How they're used, the importance that they have, actually, honestly, I think is greater now, because
Mm.
they are, vessels to, yeah, the sort of unfiltered reality, so to speak, right? I mean, everything, we could get really deep
Everything
about
has a filter, right? Yeah.
objective, yeah, reality and blah, 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 and media ethics. And, that's a different conversation that's totally worth having. But already I think, that people, especially as this tech continues to improve in the next year, are going to think like, oh, maybe I don't need a camera for this anymore, or maybe I don't need to hire real talent, or models. And that's scary, not just for livelihoods of creators, all types, but I don't think it's going to be moving that fast. I don't think it's going to be true that that's going to be the default, at least not in the immediate future. But I think that there's still, to your point, artistry that will be irreplaceable by AI. and that people really value and will appreciate. And Miles mentioned this on my pod too earlier, but the art is something that really connects and is human to human. And I think that there's going to be a place for that, and maybe it'll be valued more highly. Maybe it needs to be, disclosed in a watermark or other types, of visual or other markers. But, it's here. I don't think it's going away. It's definitely going to change in the bigger media ecosystem. But yeah, I think that it's really important. And I'm not going to stop taking photos or making videos, even if things continue to grow and take off in my AI practice and businesses. I love, telling stories through visuals and increasingly through audio, through podcasting too. I'm not going to stop that.
Good. Peter, this has gotten me thinking, as it always does when I talk to you. And I'm really excited. I'm not as nervous about AI because of what I've learned through you to see what's possible doing it in the right way. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this stuff. I'm excited for your newsletter, your course, your community that you have. I'm in there, and I'm excited to learn more about how to build my own tools and build an assistant, and how to automate some things, but also enhance the quality, enhance my work and what I can, the ideas that I have for the world, kind of augment that and enhance that for everyone.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you just got a new newsletter subscriber, so I'll see you in my inbox. And,
right on.
Man, what a fantastic conversation. I already know we're going to have you back sooner than later, because I feel like we just scratched the surface and there's so much more to talk about. So I really look forward to that. And thank you.
My pleasure. Would love to, Bill. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Miles, Bill, this has been awesome. Yeah, there's a lot here. I love having the opportunity to get into the weeds of all this stuff and, process it through these conversations too, because things are happening fast. It's tough. And this is really a great way to even develop and further refine kind of my own opinions in real time. Yeah. So really appreciate the chance. Yeah. Listeners out there, you're very lucky to have Bill and Miles here. I look forward to coming back on at some point.
The world is overwhelming. We're constantly being pulled in a million directions, and it's only going to get worse. So much of what we're sold online is about planning, strategizing, and thinking. But doing is the hardest and most important part. The box is where projects get finished. In the box, you'll organize, prioritize your projects, and finish what you start. You won't learn anything new. You'll simply get a lot done and be a part of a small community of doers. Go to theboxworkshop.com. Hey, thanks for listening today. We can't do this without the support of our listeners, so please leave us a review or sign up for our newsletter at subtleartofnotyelling.com.